Holder. Come on, you gotta wake up. Come on, wake up. We're gonna watch the second episode of the Dudley Moore interview on Later, the one that aired on April 3rd, 91. We watched the other one yesterday. You liked him. He was very, very funny. Well, here he talks about when he got to be funny and learned to be funny. He hooked up with this guy, Peter Cook, in England, and they were right in the whole zone with Monty Python and all the British comic geniuses of the 60s. And then he came to America, and he felt alienated by his, I think, wittier and smarter comedians on a whole. But anyhow, he felt ignored by them because he was being Americanized. So it's a really cool interview. Come on, wake up. Don't breathe inside of me. Wake up and watch Dudley Moore.
Later, our time ran out last night, and Dudley Moore and I were still talking, so we just decided to let the tape roll, and tonight we're going to go off in a different direction. Is that okay?
No, I'm all right with that direction we had last night. Anything new might faze me.
Oh, so pretty much we have to stay on the same track. All right, so here we go.
I don't really care, okay?
Fine.
I mean, it's really getting past my bedtime.
Can I just fire the next question then? Is that all right with you? Do I have your permission?
Oh, yes, please.
When you were nominated for the Oscar for Arthur, I'm told that you actually were very ambivalent about the possibility of winning.
Oh, I didn't want to win, no. I mean, it sounds strange. And probably that will be the truth. But Henry Fonda was up for the first time, I think. Was it the first time? I don't know if it was the first time, actually. But it was, I mean, I thought, well, if...
So you were pretty sure it was going to be the last time?
Yeah, because, you know, he was very frail, and I thought, hell, I mean, if I win this and he doesn't get it, it would have been an awful moment, actually. And so I really didn't want to get it. I mean, it's very self-sacrificing, but it's true.
To the point of not preparing any acceptance speech or anything like that?
I mean, I don't prepare on the whole anyway too much. I do much more now in various areas, but I mean, I didn't then because I just felt, I felt pretty sure that he would get it, as a matter of fact. I mean, comedies don't normally, you know, get too honored on the whole.
Whereas On Golden Pond was unnatural, seemed to fit the specifications of what wins Oscars, and it was an excellent film.
Yeah, absolutely, and he was wonderful in it. He was wonderful.
On the heels of the great success with Ten and Arthur, you did a Playboy interview in the early 80s. Memorable, to be sure. Were you too candid?
Not really.
With the interviewer?
Not really. I tend to be candid with any stranger. I don't see any point, really, in hiding that sort of stuff for... It amused me. It really did amuse me. I felt it was so funny. The technicolored multiplicity of stuff that I went through when I was a kid. And it was all to do with sex. And it was, you know...
Were you just trying to keep the customer satisfied to a certain extent? You know, if you had gone on with Dinah Shore, could you have delivered what Dinah Shore would have wanted for her show, and then walked out the door, sat down with the Playboy interviewer and said, hey, they need something a little bit racy, so you delivered what you thought they needed?
No, I don't think I was delivering anything either. I know what you're saying, but you know, the only thing that would put me back, say, if I was with a polite interviewer, would be, unfortunately, probably being in some way infected by that, you know, in some way contaminated and being... I remember when I did Desert Island Discs in London, a radio show with a guy called Roy Plumley who had a very sort of upper-class voice. He was a very nice man. And I found myself talking rather like this at the end. And being... you know, because I tend to be a bit like a chameleon, and... Nancy Collins, who did the interview, was not particularly raunchy either, but I just felt... I thought it was funny. I thought it was... And I don't have any funny anecdotes either. People say, tell me something funny that happened on Ten or Arthur. Must have been lots of fun. Nothing funny happened. Because, you know, funniness happens when there's a lot of tension.
No, but you had funny observations in your responses. Little twists at the ends of answers.
Well, I haven't read it in such a long time.
You'd lead her to the point of what one thought was a solemn observation, and then you'd give it a funny turn at the end.
Well, I can't...
But 80% of it, at least, was about sex.
Yeah, that's true. But I tend also to be a little that way when I feel I'm getting pompous about myself. I suddenly see myself, and I laugh, and I want to make it entertaining because it's a way of it's my way of getting to know people.
Well, I'm so touched.
Yes, you certainly are.
When did you first feel you had the facility to make people laugh?
I didn't until
Really?
I was 13. No, I mean, I was a very po-faced, solemn little boy, I think, as opposed to a po-faced, solemn little man. Then when I was 13, I suddenly decided I can't bear having my pants pulled down and I can't, and I'm looking around all over the place. I can't bear to do that anymore. I've got to somehow make myself harmless, and that I did. I remember the moment when I sort of shouted out in class some terrible joke, as what jokes were, of course, generally at that age, and everybody looking at me. But at that moment, I felt sort of relief. I was joining the others against the teachers, against, you know, I mean, I was academic as much as one could be in those days. I was really fascinated by work. But I got angry in a way because I turned my back on that side of things.
So this was a way you discovered to disarm people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a way of disarming people. But I could also get away with murder, too. I could be pretty hostile without it being totally understandable as such. Although, you know, if the laughter overrode the aggression, then it was all right, generally. I could be... Because nobody would want to hit me or be nasty to me if everybody was laughing, you know.
Were you subjected to more aggression than the average kid encounters, do you think?
I think I was more solemn and priggish and more afraid than most kids were. I was small, not that was a factor when I was 13, really. I have a club foot, so that kids used to sort of constantly be, you know, mocking me, which it happens, you know, happens all the time. But it doesn't make it easier to contend with. And I spent a lot of time in hospitals and away from children, so I didn't know how to deal with the outside world, really. You know.
Several operations trying to correct the problem when you were a very young child?
Yeah, when I was a couple of weeks old, they operated quite a lot on my left foot, and the right one seemed to right itself. Both legs were in. And the left one was more severely damaged, and so up until the time I was 7, I suppose, I had surgery of one sort or another, and some very frightening times. And I think it, you know, it built up a lot of fear in me, you know.
Did your mother and father do much to allay that fear?
Not really. I think they were very bewildered by... They didn't... I think my mother was really quite upset that she had to deal with it at all. I mean, it was anger at having to deal with it, you know, for her own sake, and anger for me having to put up with it. You know, I think she felt pretty inadequate and guilty about it, you know, which is awful, really.
Mixed with a mother's natural desire to protect her son or daughter from pain and difficulty.
Yeah, and I'm sure she felt it was, you know, she'd had it seems a fairly tough life. I mean, she was the eldest of 9 children, and she was sort of put in charge of them. And then to come to a family situation where she had me to deal with, I think it was probably pretty difficult, actually.
I read somewhere where there was a moment when you were a young child where a nurse in one of those hospitals showed some tenderness towards you that obviously stuck with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Up until this moment, it's all gone. I mean, just right about a moment ago.
But now you can't recount the story. What a sad turn.
I tried to reach her. I tried to find her. I wrote to, and I very much support the place that I went to because of that memory, because it was really a very precious memory to me. Because she was very... it was my first experience, I suppose, of unconditional love, in a way. It was just very beautiful and sweet, and I could never find her. I wrote to the place, and they didn't have records going back that far.
If it's not too personal, what did she do?
Oh, well, I remember it was just that she kissed me, you know, and she said, "Shall I kiss you goodnight?" I was in this convalescence home. I was absolutely terrified, and but everything she did was very, you know, do you want it? No, okay. And I'd never encountered that before. And then she said, "Well, shall I kiss you goodnight?" And I said, "No," you know, my usual sort of resentful way. And then as she went away, I thought, gosh, he's not being angry, she's not being rejected. I said, oh, yes. And so she does Kiss Me Goodnight. And it was a very sweet moment, and I'll always feel that. I'll always be mesmerized, I suppose. I'm sure each one of us has that sort of rosebud moment, you know, at some point.
Jesus and you'll be saved. Pray to Satan and you're a slave. All the gypsy Spain women for the history. Come backstage and save me.
That's terrific.
Do some of your old British cohorts, maybe including Peter Cook, have a tough time in some way with the kind of Americanized Dudley Moore?
A little bit, and I feel a little bit of resentment, actually. I remember Jonathan Miller, whom I really like, you know, sort of said, oh, well, Dudley probably fitted in California because of, you know, or Shirley MacLaineism, you know, previous lives and mysticism and stuff. As if I'm really, you know, prone to believing everything like that. And the reason why I went... It sort of offended me because it was a fairly sort of shallow look at me, but I guess that happens in life. There are certain people you really like and you'd like to be friendly with, and you are probably friendly with, and then they say these pretty strange things. I like to keep those strange things to myself. I don't know how people can go public with it, just like I did, huh? Funny. This is an analysis. What is your name? Dr.
Dr. whatever.
Bob, yes.
But you think it's just a product of success? When you have a success that
I think
transcends the previous definition of it. I mean, Cook and Moore were successful.
Yeah.
But then there came a 70s and 80s Dudley Moore success that was international and by any standard enormous.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't quite understand, as a matter of fact, when we did Broadway shows, why we weren't, you know, why people weren't coming around to offer us things. We didn't get offered anything. It wasn't like Brando and Streetcar Named Desire. You know, nobody gave a damn about these English people. And I guess, you know, the great thing about Ten and Arthur was the sort of expansion of visibility, you know. It was more than that, I suppose, in many ways. And those scripts won't really come again, I don't think, you know, that same opportunity. But
what, if at all, is the difference in the way you're viewed now, as you perceive it, in England, as opposed to the way you're viewed in the United States? Do English audiences appreciate you differently, or in some way other than the way we do?
Well, you know, curiously enough, I did a series of commercials in England, which I mean, people know me now who didn't know me from Adam, actually. I don't know that the films... I mean, Ten and Arthur achieved, I think, a similar success in England, and the other films not quite so much at all. But then there's been this television resurgence, you know. I mean, I'm playing this sort of salesman for Tesco, which is a sort of a line of supermarkets, and I'm looking for chickens. And I'm basically doing stuff that I used to do 30 years ago, doing a sort of a caricature. Maybe they want to see me humiliated on a daily basis, you know, falling down hills and not getting things right. That's in a sense what you have to live with, I think, when you're small, and what, you know, you get a little niche and you work it. I didn't expect any real success from that, but I got it. And it's amazing. I don't know. In a way, people think that I've abandoned England. You know, I've let the sinking ship sort of go down, and some people have reprimanded me and said, you know, things like, "Come home, Dudley, all is forgiven." As if I haven't abandoned them. I haven't, you know, subsumed anybody either. You know, it's not as if I don't feel that jingoistic that you know, I'm influenced by one country or another.
Back to something we were talking about before. What were the funniest bits that you and Peter Cook did?
Well, I remember with great affection, and I always cry with laughter when I see it. There was a piece that we did when we were these two Cockney characters, Dud and Pete, which we called ourselves for want of a better inventive quality there. And
who would have thought of that?
Who would have thought of that? Dud and Pete. And we were in an art gallery, and just just sort of talking very pompously, you know, about these paintings, you know. And that was what we did. We talked pompously about everything, art and life and, you know, sex and women. And he was a know-all. He knew everything about everything. And I, you know, as I am a bit, I'm a sort of an amateur. And that was my favourite sketch because it encapsulated the enormous spirit that we had, the enormous enthusiasm and the joy that we had working with each other.
What about One-Legged Tarzan?
Oh, well, the One-Legged Tarzan is a great sketch. He wrote that when he was 18, can you believe that? And I say that every time as if it's probably never been said before, but I am constantly amazed that the guy was 18 when he wrote it, and it's really a wonderful sketch about a guy who comes in and on one leg applying for the role of Tarzan, and it's really the story of this very diplomatic agent saying, well, I love your right leg, Mr. Speaker. When I saw it come in, I said, hello, what a lovely leg for the role. I've got nothing against your right leg. Trouble is, neither have you.
Ooh. Let's talk about the Showtime program, Orchestra.
No, don't let's talk about it.
Okay, let's not. Would you care to?
I'd love to, yes, thank you.
Tell me all about it.
Yes, I'll tell you all about it. Well, it was basically a program about the orchestra, and it was trying. It's a sort of a last-ditch effort to stop people turning off programs that involve orchestral concerts and stuff by explaining what goes on in an orchestra, dividing it up into sections, into upper strings, lower strings, woodwind, percussion, etc. It really just demonstrates our own enthusiasms for the orchestral music and what it can do, and my own mystification at some of the instruments and you know, whatnot.
You know, despite the fact that many orchestras play well-known, popular, accessible music, the Boston Pops is the most obvious example, despite the fact that many conductors have become major figures either nationally or in their communities, I still think it's pretty fair to say that the average young person in America is abysmally ignorant of how entertaining this sort of thing can be.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what is remarkable is that the orchestra, the Schleswig-Holstein Festival Orchestra, as I believe it's called, is made up of young people, all in their early 20s, who are about to become orchestral players or soloists. And I'm glad to see that, and I'm glad that we chose that orchestra, or rather George Solti did, because it shows a connection between the enthusiasm of youth and the listener. You know, it can be there.
Are Brits any better in terms of, if you took a 15-year-old in England, typical 15-year-old,
I think so.
Is he or she better off in that regard than...
I think so. I think there's more, you know, I was in Europe recently, and I'm going back to Europe again, but, you know, you turn on the television late at night, and there's concerts everywhere, orchestral concerts, and you know, there's a lot of cultural things happening, which I think are very helpful to young people, and it's a different atmosphere, there's no doubt, you know, and I love this country because I came over because I felt there was a sort of a lenience and an enthusiasm, a sincerity and a sweet naivety that I hadn't really found in Europe. However, there is, for better or worse, there is a leaning towards culture in Europe that is very fascinating, and I think does prepare kids for, you know, reading and entertaining themselves.
All right, we've done it. 2 shows with Dudley Moore. Now Dudley and I are leaving to see if we can get over to Belmont in time to pick up a couple of mounts tomorrow morning. And until then, or whenever, see you later.